The cold didn't just bite, it owned us. By December 1942, my rifle was a frozen piece of useless iron, and my boots were filled with the black rot of frostbite. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that began to settle in our ranks. We weren't just losing a battle, we were being erased from history. My name is Hans, and this is the story of the letter I never expected anyone to read. I remember the exact moment the war ended for me. It wasn't a bullet. It was a chocolate bar. A small, silver-wrapped Hershey's bar found in the pocket of a fallen American volunteer. As I looked at that high-quality foil, and the rich, dark cocoa inside, I looked down at my own hands, blackened by frost, holding a piece of bread made of 50% sawdust. In that moment, the propaganda of the thousand-year rye evaporated. I realized we weren't fighting an army, we were fighting an industrial god that could feed its soldiers better than we could feed our generals. This is the visceral truth of the frozen hell, and the moment the Wehrmacht knew the American spirit had already won. Back in June, the sun was our ally. We marched across the border with a mechanical arrogance that is hard to describe today. The gears of the Wehrmacht were greased with the oil of a dozen conquered nations. We looked at the maps, saw the vastness of the East, and laughed. Hitler had told us, you only have to kick in the door and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down. We believed him. Why wouldn't we? We had crushed Poland in weeks. We had marched under the Arc de Triomphe while the world gasped. To us, the Americans were a joke, a nation of carmakers and jazz listeners who would never have the stomach for a real, brutal war of attrition. We called them decadent. We mocked their Hollywood films and their shiny refrigerators. We were the masters of the Blitzkrieg, and we thought destiny was written in German. I remember the dust of the Ukrainian steppe. It was a fine, golden powder that coated our uniforms and our lungs. We marched through endless fields of sunflowers. Millions of them, all turning their heads to watch us pass, like a silent, judging audience. We were thirsty, yes, but we were moving. Every day, the front line shifted 50 miles to the east. The officers spoke of the Volga as if it were a weekend destination. We will be home by Christmas, they said. The rich black soil of Russia will belong to your families. But then came the first rains of September. The Rasputitsa. The earth didn't just get wet, it turned into a primordial black glue. It claimed our trucks, our horses, and eventually, our sanity. It was the first time I saw the veteran sergeants stop joking. They knew. They had seen the maps. We were thousands of miles from Berlin, and the mud was telling us that the speed, our only weapon, was gone. We were no longer a lightning bolt, we were a tired animal crawling into a trap. When we finally reached the outskirts of Stalingrad, we thought the hard part was over. We could see the silver ribbon of the Volga shimmering in the distance. But the city didn't fall. It didn't even bend. It turned into a monster of stone, rebar, and desperate men. The Russians didn't fight like the French. They didn't retreat when their flanks were turned. They stayed in the ruins, in the sewers, in the basement of every house. We called it Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. Imagine fighting for 12 hours to capture a single kitchen. Imagine losing 40 men to take a pile of bricks that used to be a bakery. I remember a day in October. We were clearing a department store. The smell was something I will never forget, a mix of pulverized plaster, rotting grain from the silos, and the iron scent of fresh blood. There was no front line. The enemy was above you, below you, and behind you. You would clear a room, turn around, and a Soviet sniper would fire from the very hole you just crawled through. The air was thick with the dust of a dying city. Your skin became gray. Your eyes became hollow. We started to see the first American-made equipment in the hands of the Russians. A jeep here, a Studebaker truck there. At first, we mocked it. Look at the junk the Americans sent to save the Bolsheviks, we said. But then we noticed something. The American trucks didn't get stuck in the mud. Their tires were better. Their engines roared with a power our Mercedes trucks couldn't match. The shadow of the American factory was beginning to fall over the Volga, and it was a shadow that brought no warmth. On November 23, the trap snapped shut. The Russians had broken through the Romanians and Italians on our flanks. In less than 4 days, 300,000 of us were trapped in Der Kessel, the cauldron. The officers told us to stay calm. Goering has promised at Luftbrücke, an air bridge, they said. The Luftwaffe will fly in 500 tons of supplies every day. We looked at the sky until our eyes ached. We waited for the roar of the Junkers. But the sky was empty, or worse, filled with the Red Air Force. When the planes did arrive, it was a cruel joke. One day, a canister dropped near my unit. We scrambled for it, fighting each other like animals, hoping for bread, for meat, for ammunition. We broke it open with a bayonet. Inside were thousands of condoms and piles of old newspapers from Berlin. Condoms. In a place where the temperature was -30 and men were losing their genitals to frostbite. We burned the newspapers to stay warm for 10 minutes, watching the headlines about the impending victory turn to ash in our hands. Hunger is not a sharp pain. It is a slow, rhythmic roar that eventually drowns out your own thoughts. First, we ate the horses. The majestic animals that had pulled our artillery from the Rhine to the Volga were slaughtered in the snow. Their meat was tough, stringy, and tasted of despair. Then we ate the dogs. Then the cats. Eventually, we were searching the frozen ground for leather straps, pieces of harness, or frozen grass to chew on just to keep the stomach from eating itself. I saw men, elite soldiers of the 6th Army, crying over a handful of moldy grain. And then, I saw the contrast. We captured a small Soviet supply post that had been replenished by American Lend-Lease. We found cans of Spam. We found white flour. We found real sugar. I remember holding a tin of American meat and realizing that while we were using horses from the 19th century, the Americans were supplying an entire continent with the push of a button. The realization was a physical blow. We weren't just being outfought, we were being outproduced by a factor of 10. The Russians knew we were dying. At night, they played records over loudspeakers. They didn't play propaganda songs, they played the sound of a ticking clock. Tick, tick, tick. And then, a calm, female voice in perfect German would say, every 7 seconds, a German soldier dies in Russia. Stalingrad is a mass grave. Why don't you come to us? We have bread. We have warmth. It was the most terrifying sound I have ever heard. In the silence between the ticks, you could hear the men in the trenches counting. 1, 2, 3. That was when I decided to write the letter. I found a torn page from a ledger in a bombed-out pharmacy. I sat on my hands for 15 minutes just to get them warm enough to hold a pencil stub. I didn't write about the glory of the fatherland. I didn't write about National Socialism. I wrote to my mother. Dearest mother, I wrote. The ink is freezing as I speak. The officers say relief is coming, but the wind tells a different story. Do not believe the newspapers in Berlin. There is no victory here. There is only a hollow silence that smells of frozen meat. If you ever see the sunflowers bloom again in the Black Forest, think of me. I am part of this soil now. I am part of the mistake. I wasn't the only one. All around me, men were writing. In the flickering light of lamps made from rendered horse fat, a lost army of scribes was desperately trying to send a piece of themselves back to a world that was already moving on. We were ghosts who hadn't realized we were dead yet. I remember a young boy, barely 18, named Eric. He had been with us since Poland. He started screaming one night. He just couldn't take the ticking of the clock anymore. He stood up, threw his rifle into the snow, and walked toward the Russian lines with his hands up. We didn't shoot him. We didn't even yell. We just watched his gray shadow disappear into the white void. 10 seconds later, a burst of PPSH fire cut through the air. The ticking resumed. 1, 2, 3. The final assault, Operation Koltso, began in January. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. The Soviet artillery barrage lasted for 6 hours. It was a hammer that flattened everything. When the tanks came, they didn't stop to fight. They simply drove over the bunkers, crushing the frozen men inside like dry twigs. I tucked my letter into a small tin box, a tin that had once held American tobacco. I put it in the deepest pocket of my tunic. I hoped that one day, long after the snow melted and the sunflowers returned, someone would find it. I wanted them to know that we weren't just monsters. We were men who had been lied to. We were a generation sacrificed on the altar of a madman's ego. When the Red Army soldiers finally entered our cellar, I saw it again. The absolute, crushing weight of American industry. They were wearing American-made boots. They were eating American-made rations. They were even using American-made radios to coordinate our destruction. That nation of carmakers had built the machine that crushed the Wehrmacht. The last thing I remember is the warmth. For the first time in months, I wasn't cold. The flash of the submachine gun was like a small, bright sun. Out of the 300,000 men who marched into the city of Stalin, only 6,000 ever saw the Rhine again. They returned as broken men, ghosts of a lost empire. My letter survived in that tin box, found by a Russian farmer years later. It remains as a testament to the day the Wehrmacht realized that no amount of willpower or discipline can survive against the sheer, overwhelming power of a free nation's industry and the pride of its people. The story of Hans is just one of the 480 chapters we will tell on this channel. It is a reminder that history is written in blood, but it is fueled by the factories and the hearts of those who refuse to be defeated. If you believe these stories of American triumph and Axis collapse deserve to be told with the visceral truth they deserve, subscribe to Facts of War. We are on a mission to document every shock, every stun, and every moment of bravery from the greatest conflict in human history. Leave a comment below. What do you think was the exact moment the Axis knew they had lost? Thank you for watching, and God bless America.